Friday, September 8th, 2023, AGNDD Intellireport topic: Epidemiology of Attention Deficit Hyperactive Disorder. Please pardon any visual and informational inaccuracies in this entirely AI-generated Wikipedia-sourced video article.
The prevalence of ADHD in children and adolescents in Africa is approximately 7.47%, with boys being more affected than girls. The most common type is inattentive ADHD. A meta-analysis of studies conducted in 2020 revealed that approximately 7.47% of children and adolescents in Africa have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. Boys were found to have ADHD more frequently than girls, with a ratio of 2:1. The most prevalent form of ADHD was the inattentive type, affecting 2.95% of the total population, followed by the hyperactive impulsive type at 2.77%, and the combined type at 2.44%. It is uncertain whether the variations in prevalence rates internationally indicate actual differences or are a result of changes in research methods. The prevalence of childhood ADHD in Asia is less than 5%. Similar to other regions such as South America, Europe, North America, and Oceania. However, the estimated prevalence of adult ADHD is higher in the Southeast Asia region at 25.66% compared to the Western Pacific region at 9.67%. According to the WHO World Mental Health Surveys, the prevalence of childhood ADHD in China, Shenzhen, is estimated to be 0.7%, while the prevalence of adult ADHD is 1.8%. Among adults with ADHD in China, Shenzhen, 62.8% had a history of childhood ADHD. Another study estimated the prevalence of childhood ADHD in China, Hong Kong, and Taiwan to be 6.3%, with regional variations. Variability in ADHD prevalence in Chinese children can be attributed to differences in study methodology, socioeconomics, and data collection dates. The estimated prevalence of childhood ADHD in India is 7.1%, with varying estimates ranging from 1.30% to 28.9%. Male children in India have a slightly higher prevalence of ADHD at 9.40% compared to 5.20% in female children. The overall prevalence in India is similar to the global prevalence, but there may be added stigma surrounding mental disorders in the country. The prevalence of ADHD in Arab countries among school children aged 6-12 years is estimated to be between 7.8 to 11.1%. Studies that included younger children ages 3-15 years found a higher prevalence of 16%. The variation in prevalence is mainly due to differences in study methods. However, all studies conducted in various Arab countries showed that ADHD is more common in males. A study conducted in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, found that the overall prevalence of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, among primary school students was 3.4% between 2015 and 2016. Out of the 22 children identified with ADHD symptoms reported by both parents and teachers, there was a gender split of 3:1, with 13 boys, 5.7%, and 9 girls, 2.1%. A review of studies conducted in Iranian cities from 1990 to 2018 found that the prevalence of ADHD varied between 3.17% and 17.3%. Boys had higher rates of ADHD ranging from 5.03% to 29% compared to girls, whose rates ranged from 2.3% to 15%. A study conducted in Tikrit City, Iraq, found that the prevalence rate of ADHD among students in 6 primary schools was 8.67%. The majority of those affected were boys, accounting for 65% of the cases, resulting in a male-to-female ratio of 1.87 to 1. Additionally, 49% of the students with ADHD were younger than 9 years old. The most prevalent subtype of ADHD in this study was inattention, accounting for 38% of the cases, followed by combined subtype at 34% and hyperactive subtype at 28%. A survey conducted in Beirut between March and December 2012 found that 10.20% of 510 Arabic-speaking adolescents aged 11 to 17 years and 11 months had been diagnosed with ADHD. Among those diagnosed, 77% had the combined type and 6% had the inattentive type. The majority of those diagnosed were male, 67.31%, and Lebanese citizens, 94.23%. A cross-sectional study conducted in Qatar found that boys between the ages of 6 and 9 had the highest prevalence of ADHD symptoms, with 16.36% of them scoring above the threshold for the disorder. In comparison, only 4.13% of girls in the same age group exhibited similar symptoms. Among older children ages 10 to 12, 12.32% of boys and 6.08% of girls showed symptoms severe enough to warrant clinical assessment for ADHD. Overall, the average percentage of students with ADHD symptoms in Qatari schools was 8.3%. According to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, the prevalence of ADHD in children aged 4, 11 is 8.2%, and in adolescents aged 12, 17 is 6.3%. Boys have a higher prevalence of severe disorders compared to girls. The prevalence of ADHD is lower in females aged 12, 17 compared to females aged 4, 11, but similar in males. Children and adolescents from families with lower household income have higher odds of being diagnosed with ADHD. The prevalence of childhood ADHD in Oceania is similar to other regions like South America, North America, Europe, and Asia. A 2008 study called the KIG survey found that 4.8% of the 14,836 children surveyed between the ages of 3 and 17 had been diagnosed with ADHD. Boys were more likely to have ADHD, with 7.9% of boys having a diagnosis compared to 1.8% of girls. Additionally, 4.9% of participants were suspected to have ADHD based on their scores on the Strengths and Difficulties questionnaire. The prevalence of ADHD varied by age group, with the highest rates seen in the 11 to 13-year-old age group. The estimated rate of people under 18 in Spain is 6.8%. The prevalence of childhood ADHD in the UK ranges from 0.2% to 2.2%, while adult ADHD prevalence is estimated at 0.1%. In certain areas of England, there were waiting lists of over 5 years for adult ADHD diagnostic assessments in 2019. ADHD is diagnosed in 16% of school children in the United States, with higher rates on the East Coast compared to the West Coast. The diagnosis frequency differs between males, 10%, and females, 4%, possibly due to differences in susceptibility or underdiagnosis in females. Boys outnumber girls in all 3 subtypes of ADHD, but the extent of this difference varies depending on the informant and subtype. In community-based investigations, boys outnumbered girls by a ratio of 2.2 to 1 in parent-generated samples and 2.3 to 1 in teacher-based input. The estimated prevalence of adult ADHD in the Americas is 6.06%, while the prevalence of childhood ADHD in South America is 11.8%. These rates are not significantly different from other regions such as North America, Europe, Oceania, or Asia. In Colombia, Peru, and Brazil, the estimated prevalence of childhood ADHD is 1.2%, 0.8%, and 2.5% respectively, while the estimated prevalence of adult ADHD is 2.5%, 1.4%, and 5.9% respectively. Rates of ADHD diagnosis and treatment have increased in both the UK and the US since the 1970s. This is primarily due to changes in how the condition is diagnosed and treated with medications. In the UK, the prevalence of ADHD medication use increased from 0.5 per 1,000 children in the 1970s to 3 per 1,000 in the late 1990s. In the US, the number of children diagnosed with ADHD increased from 12 per 1,000 in the 1970s to 110 per 1,000 in 2011. Changes to diagnostic criteria in 2013 are expected to further increase ADHD diagnoses, especially among adults. In conclusion, the prevalence of ADHD in children and adolescents in Africa is approximately 7.47%, with boys being more affected than girls. The most common type is the inattentive type. Prevalence rates vary internationally, but more research is needed to determine the actual differences. In Asia, the prevalence of childhood ADHD is less than 5%, while the estimated prevalence of adult ADHD is higher in the Southeast Asia region compared to the Western Pacific region.
Thank you for watching this AGNDD Intellireport. Like, subscribe, and click the bell button to get notified during new uploads. And make sure to tune in next time. Stay safe and healthy. Cheers.